Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Courtney Staples. On today's episode, we have a prompt from longtime listener and patron, Kaiser. But before we get into that, would you kindly please go ahead and submit any prompts that you have over to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, where you can click the link, follow the instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. Of course, if you want to follow us on social media, we're over on Twitter at Let's Worldbuild. And if you want to come and join our Discord and chat with us more directly, would you kindly follow those instructions over to Discord for us? And finally, if you're feeling particularly generous, would you kindly please go to our Patreon and give us money there, where you'll get access to all sorts of goodies like patron-only Discord, patron-only episodes and sub-episodes and stuff that just doesn't make it, and double the length of your prompts like Kaiser is getting right now. And with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right into the prompt. Hello, Kaiser here. So this is a bit of an odd prompt, but I want you to build a BioShock style world based in a city on the bottom of the sea. That's pretty much it. All tenants won't be too strict, but they're going to keep you in theme. Sure to go dark, very dark. Tenet number 1, the world has to be a mixture of biopunk and decopunk. Number 2, there has to be gene modification. And number 3, the setting has to be based in the city on the bottom of the Atlantic. Cough, cough, rapture, cough. Because we all know BioShock Infinite was shitty. Yes, BioShock Infinite was one of the more disappointing follow-ups to a game in quite a while, and it was thematically, lore, setting, story-wise, pretty much all over the place. Had some good covers of songs, though, but yeah, it was pretty underwhelming, all things considered. And so, with those tenets out of the way, we can dive right into our prompts. So, Daniel, I've had this long-running feud with Courtney over the last couple of episodes about jumping over to you at the last second. I'm just going to skip all that rigmarole, and Daniel, you start us off with this episode. The streak continues. So, what is your first tenet, sir?
So all I've seen of BioShock are internet videos here and there. I don't really care for it, but I do like it artistically. I think it's kind of neat.
I mean, it's based on one of your favorite authors of all time, and Ayn Rand. So
right. I didn't mind the couple of novels I read for her, but that's a different story. The prompt is the city faced a terrible disaster that left its denizens few in number and transformed, and life there is dangerous.
Okay, so you haven't read or seen anything about BioShock, correct?
All I know is there's big robot guys, and it's like
they're not robots, but okay.
And Randian in design, and there's
in aesthetic, yes, for sure. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, that is essentially the plot to BioShock that you've expressed there.
Oh, well, there you go.
Am I the only one who's played BioShock, by the way?
Yeah, I've seen some of it, but I haven't actually played it.
Okay, so my references in the beginning will be lost on you, and that's okay, I suppose. Mm-hmm. If you normally skip my little rigmarole in the beginning, go back and there's like just a little slight Easter egg about why I said it that way. Yeah, there's a reason that I deviated from my normal script, but it's actually very plot relevant and important. But anyway, I mean, what else can we say about that, Daniel? Like, do you have any particular disaster in mind? Like, what are we thinking here?
No. I just felt like it gave a mood of there being something wrong with the city, and so I was wondering what could be the cause of that.
Okay.
And originally I had written, and it's left its denizens very, very weird, but I wanted to be a little bit more specific by saying few in number and transformed.
Okay. Let's focus in on transformed. What do you mean by transformed?
That I'm open to interpretation.
Okay.
I assume the transformed is part of what's made things dangerous.
Okay. Interesting. Well, damn it. How am I going to do this? I have 2 prompts, and I'm trying to be good by not mixing them into one mega prompt, or sorry, one mega tenet. But I suppose I'll just start so I can then eventually get to the because I have an idea of how we can reconcile this or to go in a direction, but I'm just going to start here. My first tenet is there are no normal animals in this city. There are only chimera, which are gene spliced versions of animals. And they are, yes, that's where I will stop. Because again, I'm trying to not do a mega tenet. So that is where I'm going to start right there. So there are no animals left. There are only chimera.
I think that's totally in line.
Yeah.
Mess up people and animals.
Yes. Yeah. But specifically, there are no regular animals, though. I want to make sure that that's clear as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That sort of aligns with what I was going to have be my second tenet, that basically all of their food sources are genetically modified because of the placement in the ocean. Like, I don't picture like a cow farm at the bottom of the Atlantic. So
yes,
I think they're going to have to resort to some pretty messed up looking creatures to harvest from.
I mean, if you're at the bottom of the Atlantic, you're going to get all sorts of weirdo things, like undersea life that you can farm or algae and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
In the original game, what was really interesting is like they have these audio logs about children who are raised in Rapture, the city, right? And the parents bring them to a park where there are actual trees, and the child freaks out because they're like, what the fuck are those things? Because to them, like, all they know is Rapture. All they know is this city that's underwater. And to see trees for the first time is like terrifying to them. So it's a fun little bit. It's like one of those like little tiny bits of world building that are just really fun,
I get an image of people like eating really grotesque chimeras as a result. So it's like, some kind of bug cat they grab and bite into, because they're pretty fucking weird.
Okay, you say bug cat, but like cat bug literally exists and is adorable. So I don't know what to tell you, Daniel.
I don't know what that is.
Oh man, well, you're about to know. Courtney and I are furiously finding pictures of cat bug like right now.
It is pretty cute. I've never actually watched that show though.
You've never seen that show? Cat bug's adorable.
Nah.
Well, anyway, so yeah, I'm also down with the idea of just like horrible, monstrous things that you need to eat. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it makes me think of Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. It's like a sort of near future dystopia type setting, and there are a lot of weird genetically modified animals that are used for food because they're more efficient for that than like a regular animal. Like I think one of them is called like Chicky Nubs, and it's basically this really horrific just mass of chicken flesh. They're also pagoons, which are giant pigs basically.
But they're also baboons.
I forget what the combo is there.
Because oon suggests baboon.
Yeah, I forget what those are.
That's lovely.
Also, Daniel, I did drop Catbug in the Discord chat if you want to look at that really quick.
It really looks like a cat. It looks like a slug with a face. And
no, it's a cat. It's a ladybug and a cat. It's super adorable. Ugh. It's great.
So pagoons are pigs bred to grow human tissue organs. So they were harvested for that reason, not for food.
I mean, that's not too far off from what we have in modern science anyway. Like we use pig skin for human skin grafting and stuff like that. So and like we test pig skin for like when we want to use human testing. So that's not too terribly off, all things considered. And also, speaking of not too far off, the giant mound of chicken flesh isn't too far off from what we actually have now anyway.
Yeah, this was more like they were no longer recognizable as chickens, as anything remotely chicken-like, I will say.
I mean, like, again, that's not too far off from like how McDonald's practices their own like chicken production. So okay, maybe it's like the definition or maybe the description is like, oh no, it's even worse than that.
Yeah, I'll just read off the description here. A large bulb-like object that seems to be covered with stippled whitish yellow skin. Out of it came 20 thick fleshy tubes, and at the end of each tube another bulb was growing. Those are chicken parts, just the breasts on this one.
Oh, that's sick.
It's lovely.
Hell yeah. Okay.
And to be honest though, Daniel,
no. Daniel.
I mean, which it is grotesque, right? But which would be better growing an animal with sentience and mass and harvesting them and making them suffer as we do, or growing something that's not sentient, that's just like a piece of quivering flesh that then we consume. Like, which is worse?
I mean,
there
that's not
really,
even an animal at that point. Like sentience or like
right?
intelligence is like kind of the important thing. So I mean, suppose we're getting there, right?
Exactly.
We're getting
Yeah.
towards lab grown food in
Yeah.
general.
I mean, I don't know if that's what's happening in the book you're talking about,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't know if they ever went into if those things have any level of intelligence or if they're just
Mhm.
meat slabs or what.
Mm. I mean, aren't we all just meat slabs at the end of the day,
Mm,
Courtney?
mm.
Okay. Let's speaking of, so is that your tenet that you want like chicky knobs in your in our setting here, Courtney? Or
Yeah,
do
that
you have
was pretty
something else?
much that was it. So should I like should I like loop back to what would be my first tenet?
I mean, well, you're gonna have to come up with a new second tenet if you do.
Uh, wait, why?
What do you mean? Because if there's so much overlap, we have to have some kind of like some kind of differentiation between us.
I mean, you were talking about chimeras, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was more referencing like things that are not really recognizable as animal-like anymore. Like they're so warped that they've become these.
Are you trying to get out of this by just being like, well,
No,
actually,
I'm explaining what my tenet is.
okay.
Um, because like I could see like the chimera-ish things being more like pets or
Actual
like
living animals.
luxury
Okay.
items, and then the what I've got, the like flesh mounds are what you
Well,
eat.
okay. All right, Courtney. Like, yes, okay. I hear what you're saying. Here's where I take issue with that because my second tenet, which also has to do with the animals, is, and I'm sorry, Daniel, I'm skipping you for this one for the time being anyway. I wanted it so the entirety of our technology is based on biomechanics. So it's like any tool that you make is literally like bone and sinew from one of these chimera beasts. So they're bred to be machines essentially. And I think that all of this works together, but like I think that all of our tenets, Courtney, so far are like pretty close together. They're
Mhm.
clustered up, but I'm cool with that. Like I'm fine with that. But the one thing I did want to emphasize, like I think that they've realized that through genetic splicing, because that's one of the tenets that I was interested in, is that they can breed these monstrosities, these chimera. Like, well, we could have steel, or we could just create these things that are able to make like bone plating that is stronger than steel, or more resistant, or heals itself, or something like that. And I wanted to apply that to anywhere. So there's no such thing as a wrench anymore. It is like literally made out of like a crab claw. Or it's like there's no guns anymore. It's a weird animal that shoots stingers or like teeth or something like that. And that's what I was really interested in kind of getting at.
Gross.
Yeah, exactly. Because I didn't want to take it into the superhero realm of BioShock, where it's like, oh,
Mm.
I'm a human and I can shoot laser beams, or I can shoot. It's not laser beam; it's telekinesis, fire powers, electric powers, and stuff. So I want to be like, okay, how can I make it so it's still splicing, but the splicing isn't necessarily human? You know?
Mhm.
So are you saying that their technology is like literally makes use of the chimeras themselves?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
when Daniel said that they were changed, I'm like, oh, that might work out for me where like, okay, in
Mhm.
order for you to use some of this tech, maybe it requires more than just picking it up and shooting it like a gun. Maybe it's like you have to partially fuse or meld with it.
Yeah.
Insert it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So like for example, like if Daniel is talking about changed humans, like maybe they're trying to turn themselves into like war machines or like juggernauts,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden you have like a lion like claw or like a big turtle shell or something like that to make you like you look barely human underneath all of this armor and like kind of biofused and biotech chimera parts. But that's kind of what I
Mhm.
have in mind when Daniel is saying, like changed human essentially.
So was Courtney then saying that there's also the added factor that the chimeras are so bizarre too that they're consumed and they're grown also
Mm.
to be consumed? Is that what you're saying,
I mean
Courtney?
that's
Or
really close to what I had in mind, like that some of these entities are like grown to be a plunger, grown to be a sword, like something like that. So they're not even given the opportunity to be animal. But
But I was asking her though, is consumption an important part of what you're saying?
Yes, mine was based around consumption, because if we're dealing with something that's at the bottom of the ocean, that's going to be really difficult to make use of like conventional food sources. So I think that they've created these really like even more warped than what I envisioned the chimera creatures as, like slabs of flesh that are grown in garden-esque settings, or
Ooh, okay, yeah, there
yeah.
we go. Yeah.
Or like plants that like produce ridiculous numbers of fruits or seeds or whatever, something that would be far beyond what you would see on the surface of the earth.
All right, let's go ahead and appreciate the imagery that Courtney just evoked with flesh gardens.
Yes,
Just,
yes.
I really didn't want to let that slip by. I wanted to I wanted to highlight it, circle it, underline it, embolden it, whatever we need to do, because that's absolutely awful, and I hate you. So thank you, next.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
It
geez.
seems like what you're pointing to is like having a larger focus in your tenant on the consumption aspect. And then we have an overarching tenant that like the animals are a form of technology and they're fundamentally transformed. And also like they're also part of basic tools too. Like that's how much this genetic engineering has gone.
Right. I was really interested in the idea that all technology is based in bone, blood, and sinew.
Biology,
Exactly.
which is kind of cool.
Yeah, because if we're going biopunk, then I want to go full biopunk with this thing. You know, like I don't think we've ever done something that has been so grotesque in bio. I know that we've done some biopunk stuff before, but like this is the first time where I'm like, I want tech to be biologic in nature. You know.
I think there's also something interesting it says about the setting. Like perhaps there's a reason. I mean, obviously we know something wonky is going on because they're doing this crazy genetic engineering, but I wonder if it speaks to their location that they went that route. Like, you know, you can't get the access to the same resources at the bottom of the ocean than say you could not. So perhaps using their own bodies as an extension and the bodies of these animals was a way to do that.
Yeah. And I was thinking like maybe that is sort of the reason why these survivors of whatever disaster you brought up, are they the more warped ones because they had like bodies that were able to withstand whatever happened?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, so you're suggesting that they become warped because they're more. What are you trying to say there, Courtney? Like, I think I get what you're trying to say.
Yeah, like they were the ones that had been more heavily modified to be like stronger, faster, to have greater lung capacity, what have you. And because of that reason, whatever happened killed off the ones that were less modified. So the remnants are the ones that are like less recognizable as humans at this point.
Less modified or less recognizable, or more modified or less recognizable? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I mean. Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know what's wrong with me today. I like could barely understand what you're trying to say there. But yeah, no, that sounds dope, and that's exactly what I had in mind. Yeah, where it's like, as a regular human, you walk onto this underwater city, you pick up a squid gun, and you're able to shoot like beaks or like sprays of ink or caustic acid or something like that, right? Okay, you've still got this thing that's like essentially tentacles wrapped around your hand. But then the more you go on, basically if you're a traditional D&D adventurer in this type of city and you're walking around and you're picking up armor, and like eventually once you hit level 20, you're going to look like an absolute genetic freak beast that is unrecognizable as human anymore. And if we wanted to play into the punk or the cyberpunk aspect where you lose your humanity the more technology you use, you know, kind of like Atom Smasher, or, you know, where you basically stop caring about being a human because the human is the thing that pilots the meat exosuit that you wear. You know, that's the kind of thing that I think would be kind of interesting to work on.
Meat exosuit is a very vivid image
Yeah.
that I really like.
To go back to the question about the disaster, I have a feeling that the state of this society was to move so drastically into bioengineering. Probably the disaster precipitated that. One of the reasons why I think that is because he mentions decopunk as well.
Yep.
And from what I've read about that, the art movement has something to do with creating efficiency in art itself. And so I wonder, you know, could it be a response to a disaster that those efficiencies came into play and then, of course, bled into the culture? And maybe part of achieving that is through bioengineering.
What would that look like to you?
Well, the art movement suggests like kind of austerity. So like the art movement suggests stuff like this perfect chrome and minimalistic features. But I wonder in this setting that might be something different, and it might have something to do with the body and streamlining our biology, maybe, because that's the thing we have to rely on. So removed from resources in the surface.
What if the city itself has over time become flesh-like?
Yes.
That's kind of what I was hoping. Yeah,
Yeah.
like you'd open it up and it's
Yes.
basically like you cannot tell where metal once was, you know?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's so
or
fun.
like
I love it.
as you get closer to maybe even whatever caused this disaster, it like gets like
Oh,
yeah.
more like a living thing.
Yes.
No, I'm cool with
Yes.
that.
Oh, you realize those aren't holes, those are pores. Those are
Yeah,
pores.
yeah.
Okay, well, think about like some of the challenges about being a city on the bottom of an ocean, right? Think about what that might
Mhm.
be. What is a big problem when seawater specifically hits metal? You experience a
Mhm.
lot of rust,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So there's probably got to be like a lot of, structural where you have to like reconstitute things over and over again. So I think their solution is, well, wait a minute. What if we just replace the steel with this like bio bone or this bio chitin because it's water resistant, it's resilient to salt water far better than steel. And that way we don't have to do any, like it just like this logical conclusion, like, hey, we're just trying to survive down here at the bottom of the ocean. And
Mhm.
then all of a sudden, like blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you got a giant freak flesh beast in there, like it makes sense to me if I'm looking at it,
Yeah. What was going to be my first tenet, I think could also help explain some of that.
then go for it. Yeah.
Alright,
We're just skipping all over the place with these tenets today.
all over.
Yeah.
So it was, kind of a multi-part tenet about where this place is, and while
Mhm.
I was looking up stuff about the Atlantic Ocean for this prompt, I learned that the deepest part is the Puerto Rico Trench, right by the
Ooh.
Caribbean Sea, and the deepest part of that trench is called the Milwaukee or Brownson Deep at almost 8,400 meters, and to take Kaiser's bottom of the Atlantic very literally, that's where I'd like this to be set.
Okay. Just for context here, how tall
Mhm.
is Mount Everest?
Good question. It is 8,800 meters. So,
Okay. So we're
yeah,
inverting Everest here, right?
pretty much, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I just wanted to use that as like a good kind of like thought to think of when it's like, hey, as tall as the tallest mountain in the world, that's how deep below
Mhm.
the ocean we are. So yeah, that's horrifying.
It is,
Uh
it is. So, that that area, that trench is very active seismically, which to tie it in, maybe that's why part of why they started using the flesh is because flesh can stretch and contract, and,
oh
that might
yeah.
Yes.
alleviate any issues from, having plates shifting down there.
Oh.
There is also a mud volcano at
Ooh.
7,900 meters deep, and I was thinking that, like, maybe the mud from that has drifted down over time and settled on top of the city, which could both strengthen it structurally and perhaps make it harder to travel to and from it.
Yeah,
Mm.
because we don't really know how cut off this city is from the rest of the world yet. We're assuming
Mhm.
that this is like this entire. Oh, well, maybe actually, if you wanted to do it simply, you could just say that the reason that it is cut off is because one of these mud volcanoes erupted and buried it
Mhm.
in the mud. And
Yeah,
that
yeah.
could be the disaster that Daniel's talking about as well, that forces this kind of necessary, like, okay, we have very little resources. What can we do? What can we rely upon? You
Mhm.
know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that works.
My second tenet addresses that
Oh.
specifically.
Look at this.
Wow.
We're making this happen. Daniel, what's your second tenet then?
I mean, it doesn't give the answer, but my second tenet was that the city has been sealed up so as to separate it from civilization for many
Oh,
years,
perfect.
but that it has only recently been unsealed.
Oh,
Mm.
there we go. Again, very much like the plot of BioShock. So
Oh, really?
What
yes,
happened to unseal the city in BioShock?
a plane crash.
Oh, I see.
So a plane crashes over this thing, and then you're the lone
I
survivor
see.
of that plane crash. You then enter this lighthouse and then enter down into the city of
Okay.
Rapture. Yep.
It would seem that there are certain narrative inevitabilities when it comes to stories.
Yes.
And so, having not known the plots to this game, given the same starting conditions, it's possible to arrive at a similar story setup.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, if we could name this city something to do with Everest, I think that would be an interesting kind of like nod to what it means, right? So maybe call it like Olympus or Everest or Under Everest or something like that. It's a very simple name, yes, but also like Rapture is too. So something that is indicative of like humanity's rising above, like the basics of nature, or like above nature, right? Like that's kind of what we're trying to get at with the name.
The translation of the Tibetan name for Everest is Holy Mother.
Oh God,
Ooh,
that's awful. I hate that so much.
I love it.
No,
I love it.
because okay,
Beautiful.
all right. Into the Womb of the Holy Mother is like the title of this episode.
Yeah.
Because that's essentially what we're doing here.
Fucked up.
Is that how the like flesh human creatures are formed? They like go into some vat and like are birthed
Ew.
again.
Oh God. Yes, obviously. Unfortunately,
yes.
What else would it be? You guys.
Oh God.
Oh.
I mean, it would be. We talking about the source of the disaster. I think it would be interesting if part of the goal of being in this story, whether it's a story to be told as a novel or a game, is coming to terms with why this is here and how it came to be ruined. And that might be fun for a game master to determine as the starting conditions for their game, like when they run this, or for the storyteller to figure out. Because if you're thinking of like any, like even I guess like the basis of BioShock, based on what you described, like you're discovering what this is and you're kind of wandering into it. And that's part of the horror of it. And then possibly finding these gangs of mutated chimera humans,
in BioShock, they're called splicers. So,
okay.
Yeah. But I think that the splicers that are in BioShock, they're more like humans with guns that are like have gone crazy due to drug abuse. Whereas like the chimera folk that I'm thinking of are like
literal beasts.
Yeah, like they are literal monsters. So like it is very different from what I had in mind.
I think that's more interesting too, with them being literal beast monsters, because you might have different states of mutation.
Yeah.
Like you could have like people who are relatively human but psychotic versus like horrible monsters. And I wonder too, if you flip the tables, like people seem to be more worried about the psychotic monsters out there, but actually maybe they're more reasonable than the actual psychopaths, who are not fully monsters.
I think that having a stereotype or an assumption that the giant freak beast mutants are going to be like the unreasonable ones is a fun way to kind of be like, like one of them is just like, have you seen the rest of the things that are out there? Like, I have to be this way, like, and then on the opposite side, like maybe a human who just has like a squid gun and like a turtle shield, they're like, I'm pure and I'm going to burn all the monsters, like that kind of incredibly horrible mindset. You can have a little bit of fun with both. Why not?
Right.
Yeah. Well, we've slapdashedly kind of gone all the way around and figured out all of our tenets now at this point, correct?
I think so, yeah.
All right, great. Do we have any lingering questions that need to be answered about the world?
It would seem the parameters of the setting really is obviously the prompt specifies the city itself, but we're not concerned with the outside world at all, right?
I'm not terribly concerned with the outside world at all. However, if we're sticking to kind of like the prompt that is, it's the Atlantic Ocean. It is not as though we're like the Atlantic Ocean. So we have to imagine that this is our world that we're dealing with, that this is Earth in some way, an alt Earth that allows for biomutation and splicing to exist. So I would like to keep that in mind, and I would like to kind of adhere to that in a stricter sense.
Yeah, okay, place out the Atlantic.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I wanted to make that clear.
Yeah. And my spot is a specific spot in the ocean too.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. Thank you.
And yeah, I was originally going to ask like what time period is this, but I also I almost feel like it doesn't matter at this point if they've been shut off from the world. Like maybe
Right.
they did kind of get split apart from the surface in that Art Deco period, like
Mhm.
20s-ish, and who knows how far into the future they've gone at this point.
Right.
I will say though that I like that's true, but I will say that part of my second tenant is that it's been recently unsealed,
Right.
which suggests people from outside coming in.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
while obviously we don't want to deal with the rest of the world at large, we might have to have some assumption as to what's going on out there in order to define the people coming in.
And how many people is that you had in mind, Daniel? Is it like they're trying to reconnect with the surface world? Like what did you have in mind?
My vision was like small number of people, like a tiny group for some reason.
Mm.
So can we say that it's like maybe a scientist crew or like
Mhm.
maybe they're archaeologists trying to find the lost city underneath the Atlantic or something
Yeah,
like
like
that.
some unwitting, some poor dummies.
It's no, it's James Cameron doing some
It's James
research.
Cameron.
Oh, that's so dumb. I love it. Oh my God.
Some unwitting dummies who are going to be eviscerated. Yeah.
All right. I don't care what we do. One of those guys, because we're talking the 90s at this point, one of the people who enter into that subcity, who enter once more into the womb of the Holy Mother, is wearing a Bart Simpson t-shirt that is canon. I'm making sure that that is absolutely going to be a thing in this setting. God damn it. Okay. One of the first people back wearing a Bart Simpson t-shirt.
I like the idea of this could have been opened onto any time period, like depending on how you want to like set it up.
Mhm.
So you could literally have like, for example, your 90s crew, you could have a film crew, you could have archaeologists coming 30 years after. So what is that, like the 50s, right?
Yeah.
Like it all depends on when you want to open it. So it
Mhm.
gives it a lot of replayability, right?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So the initial disaster was this mud slide, right? Like mud volcano, correct?
Or some, I mean, I'm not as excited about a mudslide.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
like that as an option. Like, I think that can definitely work, and we could just run with that as a placeholder, right? Because I think you could switch it up depending on how you want to set it up. We just need something to destabilize it. That's really it.
Yeah, maybe the mud was just like what sealed it off, but the disaster itself was
Oh,
something different.
Oh, that I'm
I like
fine with.
that.
Yeah. Because I
Yeah, I
feel like
like
if we
that.
have mud volcanoes, like, and we don't use them to seal off the city, then like,
Yeah, I gotta
come
steal
on.
something.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like layers of it being removed. The disaster kind of fucks up the city internally, and then this external disaster happens that covers up the problem, you know?
I'm
Yeah.
cool with
Yeah,
that.
or the
Yeah,
opposite
100%.
even where the mud covers it up and then due to desperation, some other disaster takes place.
Oh, yes. That's good too.
Well, I mean, there's a lack of humans. Like maybe there's some answer to why there's a lack of humans in that disaster. I mean,
You mean in the sense that they're transformed?
no, I mean, like maybe the disaster is what caused the lack of humans, is what I'm suggesting here.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. But
Mhm.
like, what does that look like? What does that mean? Why did that happen? Like, those are questions that I think we should
Mhm.
probably try and answer, right? Because we have the conceit that is the disaster, right? I think
Mhm.
Mhm.
actually what I would like to do is to name the disaster or at least figure out what kind of disaster it is, because if the mud volcano is what sealed it, then there's a disaster that happened beforehand that precipitated its fall, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like the idea of there being two things. One that's kind of an internal breakdown, and then two is
Yeah.
a final event to fuck things up,
Right.
Mhm.
permanently fucked up. Or vice versa, like you said, Courtney.
I'm assuming that if I spoil BioShock for you, none of you will be
I
disappointed,
don't
right?
care.
No.
Okay. Okay. So I just want to throw this out there so we can see where the parallels lie and then like see where we can deviate, right? So effectively what happens is that in BioShock, there is this thing called Atom, which is like a tonic that is highly addictive that people can
Mhm.
jam into their systems and gain superpowers, right? So you can gain telekinesis, the ability to shoot lightning, you can grow a hive of bees in your arm and shoot them at people, stuff like that, right? People become addicted to Atom, and this essentially creates this market of addiction and stuff like that. And then there is disenfranchisement among working class people. And then this really scummy person comes in, creates a secondary market of knockoff Atom, and then causes this civil war between these two capitalist organizations. And then the civil war decimates the population and seals off the city from the rest of the world. So, with that being said, what parallels do we want to draw and where do we want to deviate? Or do we want to do hard one and hard the other? What do y'all think?
Yeah, my first instinct when we started talking about what this disaster could be, other than the mudslide, was some sort of civil mini war within this place. But I almost want to like find something else that hasn't been done before.
Yeah, I agree with you because that was also exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I guess it also points to the idea of there being certain like narrative conclusions you draw that everyone kind of goes to because it makes sense, right?
Right.
Like, innately. I think something is attractive about the idea of decopunk initially being utopian, even though it's based on a sort of austerity, which typically stems from something dystopian. I think it would have been interesting if this place was utopic at some point and it had a breakdown. Like it actually started out good and there were correct intentions and the efficiency of the body was something to be achieved.
Right.
Like maybe this was a project under the ocean that didn't go right.
Like in BioShock.
So it's a utopia there initially.
Exactly right. Yes. It's marketed as a utopia. Yeah.
Well, so then what I would say is that it didn't fail because it failed as a project. I think that would be what I would propose. Like it didn't fail because the idea was wrong or perverted. Something happened to it that made it fail.
Oh, okay.
Because usually the move typically is, oh, utopias are inherently unstable and impossible to achieve, so therefore they always break down. Well, fuck you. Let's say it did work and it was good and stable and something broke it, you know?
Yeah.
What eventually makes Rapture crumble is the hubris that is man, obviously, and essentially like a hyper capitalist, what's it called, objectivist style of political system.
Like objectivism being like the ultimate selfishness as a philosophy.
Exactly. Thank you, Daniel. So let's instead say like, yeah, no, we actually did create a utopia and it just gets fucked up by the outside world. What happened with the outside world? Was it like a nuclear bomb testing that suddenly causes some kind of like rupture or something? Actually, that's kind of interesting, right? Because
interesting,
yeah. You can actually then
tie it to history.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I feel like that might be really good for Kaiser because then we're tying it to a historical event, which is part of like I'm sure his inspiration.
Right.
You know.
What if it's like something to do with radioactive fallout from a nuclear test, like falling into the ocean and mutating the city itself?
Yes.
Wait. Okay, yeah, because it's all fleshy at that point anyway.
Right.
But remember the way that we treat mutation is like through Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and like how actual mutation tends to manifest is through something else. You know, like it's far more benign or not benign, but
through dying, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, we can assume that there were things that happened in history from a fantasy perspective, especially a lot of conspiracy sort of things that happened, like whether they were nuclear testing or weird stuff. Like I'm thinking like MK Ultra and all that weird stuff that we assume part of our history and it's kind of conspiracy lore stuff. Perhaps there was something we can point to that's interesting and that's in the time period near and surrounding it that happened that then bleached over into this project.
Okay. I have some ideas because you've said MK Ultra and that's literally my my awakening phrase. So so here's what we can do. The government, because remember, if we're talking 50s, this is after Operation Paperclip when we started working with Nazis, when we start having when we start having like black sites filled with torture and violence, and we're no longer like the good guys of the world, right? Like we're demonstrably just like not good government folk anymore. So this is the 1950s when all of a sudden paranoia starts to ramp up, when the government is essentially saying, we need someone on the inside of this underwater city. MK Ultra agent awakens underneath the water. Like, come on. How is that not like the easiest thing in the world to do when you need a spy? You need a government spy underneath. And then all of a sudden, maybe something happens where
communism can't be tolerated, just like you're suggesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
This is a fucking communist utopia. We can't have that.
Yeah. There you go.
Sorry, I didn't mean to short circuit you, but like that's immediately where you got me. As soon as you said this MK Ultra agent awakens and we're now paranoiac. Like
here's the cover story, right? Here's the cover story. The cover story is nuclear bomb testing. That is the cover story. What actually happened was the government deliberately trying to bury this city because it was
great.
proving their ideological system incorrect or at least
That
inconsistent.
is fucking great.
There we go.
It's fucking great.
Right. Now, mind you, MK Ultra and the Manchurian Candidate stuff is very much a part of the BioShock plot.
Oh, it is really?
Yeah.
Okay.
The reason I said "would you kindly" at the beginning of this episode is because you find out, you know, like you're kind of pigeonholed and you're kind of like railroaded in the first half of the game, and you're like, oh wow, this is kind of like really blatant how, you know, like I'm on rails. And then halfway through, you find out that you've been brainwashed and your phrase to like control you is "would you kindly." So when Andrew Ryan, the major villain of this whole thing, says, "Would you kindly kill me?" and then you do that, you're like, oh shit, I have no control over my character. And it's a good ludo narrative thing too. There's a reason that that moment is seen as like remarkable in video games and in the plot, right? Spoilers for a very old game at this point, by the way, but it's fantastic, and that moment in particular is like, oh my god. And then they shit their pants with one of the worst later halves of a game ever. The ending to that is so bad. The fucking main villain at the very end is literally like a big blue skinned like monster man, and it's just like, it's terrible. It's so awful compared to like that first.
Why is he a blue monster man?
Because he injects himself with a bunch of the genetic mutation atom stuff so he can defeat you. But he becomes a big monster man, shoots lightning and fire and ice and stuff like that. It's dumb. It's terrible and it's dumb. But like all the first half and all of the Andrew Ryan stuff is actually phenomenal. It's really interesting. And like you have to beat him to death with a putter in his office. And it's like this really like you have to continually click the prompt to do so. And it's like, oh, this is awful and horrible and really interesting. But okay, rant over. But yes, all of that stuff that we said happens because of course it did, because the government tried to cover it up. And so now, years later, they're like, oh, we're going to try and uncover the underwater communist utopia, or something else happened there too, right? Well, actually, no. That's what happened. Like, oh, it was a failed communist experiment that got buried when this disaster happened, right?
So to clarify, this MK Ultra-esque agent goes, and do they cause some sort of civil disruption in the community, or are they behind the like mudslide that buries it, or both?
I'm going to say that it's a twofold thing, that when the government realizes that they're no longer in control, that then they bury them with a quote unquote nuclear bomb testing that just so happens to trigger a mudslide. So that's the sealing aspect.
Okay.
And there's a couple of things that we can do with the initial thing. Number one, the Manchurian Candidate or the MK Ultra agent could wake up and be like, no, everything's good down here. And then that spooks the government as a result. They're like, oh, no.
They send more people.
You know?
Right. I bet he's probably doing his job to some extent. And then as he's trying to do what he's supposed to do, which is to stabilize any communist elements, he realizes, actually, this is a great thing.
Yes.
And I can't continue to do this. And that's when he gets compromised, and they send people to deal with him, as well as initiate the burying of the whole civilization.
Yeah, I like that idea that the American government, like sending a strike force to do this thing, is the inciting incident. That's actually really interesting. I find that to be really intriguing. I like that.
Because then you'll find his, like, if you're playing this, you can find his logs as a player and learn about what the society was, and that even this person realized it was a good thing and what they were accomplishing was incredible, and that we fucked it up on purpose.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. And then of course you have giant chimera monster beast men, right?
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, that happens, right?
Yeah,
that just happens.
Naturally.
Naturally.
And you have like the flesh city itself that's still there. Yeah.
Yep.
I could see, oh my God, going back to your fields of flesh for harvesting food. I could
have
imagined
flesh,
like
Daniel.
Gardens, flesh gardens. Like in the utopic times, like it was like a nice, vat of flesh that was still kind of horrifying, but it was used for food. Like it was used for food, and we looked at it as like a resource, blah, blah, blah. It was good. But then after the disaster, it kind of spilled over and started infecting things. And now the food and the people kind of got mixed up. And that's where things got fucked up.
I like the idea that it started out as like, no, this looks like food and is edible. And then like, because of the disaster, it like, I just imagined like, Okay, in all of the 80s and 90s things that have like nuclear waste accidents, it's literally just like a spills over. And like that's basically it, but instead of like nuclear waste, it's like genetic material and it's like
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep. There you
Lovely.
go.
Lovely.
Yep. You did it.
God. They're like, why is this floor so slippery? What kind of marble is this? And then it's like the little holes are dilating on it.
Oh
Oh God.
Yeah.
Horrifying.
I'm like so grossed out right now. I'm like, ugh. Okay, we've
Disgusting.
answered some questions. We've answered some very important questions. So let's go back and recap so we can roll our twist and then see how weirder this gets. So Daniel, you started us off as per usual. So why don't you tell us what your tenet was?
City faced a terrible disaster. The denizens are few in number and transform, and life there is dangerous.
Okay, we have certainly satisfied those tenets in my mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so.
All right. Courtney. Oh, well, no, I think I went second. So there are no animals, there are no regular animals in this city anymore. There are just chimera. We've definitely satisfied that. Like we've got vats of genetic material. Courtney, what was your first tenet?
That tied in with yours, that genetic modification is necessary for the survival of the people there in terms of like food source, because you can't really have, a typical farm down at the bottom of the ocean. So they created these flesh gardens that we discussed, or basically mounds of material, protein and fat that you can consume.
Yeah, I feel like that's been satisfied as well.
Yeah.
God, you know when you cook like something that has like brown beef on a pan and like leaves the white fatty residue, or whatever the fuck it is. Like, oh God, could you imagine like hundreds of thousands of gallons of that crap? Oh God.
I'm sure it would be delicious with some salt and pepper.
Oh, wait, Daniel, aren't you the one who's always on about like if I could only eat
God.
nutrient paste, I would? This is your
Well,
utopia,
yeah.
Daniel.
Mhm.
Your
But see, but
entire environment is made out of nutrient paste. You don't have to worry about food
There's
ever
a difference
again.
between nutrient paste, which yes, I am 100% behind, and a vat of literal fat. That is not
Oh, it's
nutrient
nutrient
paste.
fat. Ooh, whatever. Yeah.
No,
okay,
we're
Daniel.
talking about out of control vats of fat, not carefully produced, balanced meals, which is what Soylent is.
What if we said like that the flesh gardens are highly nutritious? Are you suddenly down for them?
Not that they become flesh gardens that are stretching across things and doing what they like. My nutrient paste sits in a cup and I consume it. I don't think that there's a huge distinction between your food being out of control and doing what it's supposed to do.
No, but imagine you're in this underwater city that's been, overtaken by flesh and
Disgusting.
anti-communist elements, and you can just be wandering along, reach out to the wall, grab a hunk of meat flesh, and there's your lunch. You don't have to expend any energy.
It's a mix of every nutritious, like it's macro friendly, Daniel.
Yes.
There's a reason why civilization has a definition. And that definition demarcates the natural world from the unnatural world, or if it's going to be both unnatural on both sides, there's a reason why we have containers for things. And I mean that both metaphorically and not metaphorically.
Daniel's all for nutrient paste until it's staring him in the face, and then he's like, food's okay.
Until it takes control, absolutely.
It's not in control. What are you talking about?
Well, it's taken over the city.
No, it is kind of all over the place and has become the architecture.
Okay, it's not in control though.
It's taken over people too.
No, wait. How is it? Hold on, that's an important.
So you're telling me that a pile of flesh that is now spread to integrate itself and to replace metal is not now in control of the situation?
I haven't said anything about it taking control over people, though. That's what I want to make sure that we're clear about.
People are plugging it into themselves.
Yeah,
which
because essentially
they're using this
technology
erases their humanity, which is a form of losing control.
That's not entirely
We literally
true.
said that in the very beginning.
Only if you. Well, I said it was a possibility to mimic something like cyberpsychosis and Cyberpunk 2077. That's what I said.
We basically said at length that integrating this flesh technology into our bodies has made us less human, hence the chimera people.
What about if we had the actual plant part of the gardens? I had talked about like rapidly producing fruits and seeds. What if inside of those fruits was like a nutrient paste?
Oh,
Is
there you
that
go.
I'm totally okay with that.
Okay.
Like the pre-disaster state
Yeah.
of the utopia
Yeah.
with the flesh lake, I am on board with that. I will happily take my what do you call it? What's a spoon that's very curved? I would happily dip that spoon
Like
into the flesh
a
lake.
ladle?
Oh, your ladle. You
A
mean a
ladle,
ladle, yeah.
right? I would happily take my ladle and dip it into the flesh lake and sup from that because it's in a vat.
Uh-huh.
It's well contained.
Uh-huh.
Everything is neat and appropriate as you do in
Oh
civilization.
my
Mhm.
god.
Mhm.
So if it has ladles, then Daniel's in.
Well, okay, Courtney and Rob,
Yeah.
you don't walk down the street and put your hands into the asphalt and grab chicken nuggets out of it and shove it in your mouth.
But how
I don't
cool
think
would that
you
be
do that.
if you could, though?
No one would be okay with that.
What? What do you mean? Why not?
No one wants to dig their hands into like muck and pluck out food and put it on their faces. We are human beings that live in civilization.
But what happens if our technology allows us to be like, oh, I'm going to rip a door off, eat it, and then it's going to regrow a door?
It's
in
not
my
even
house?
sanitary. We wouldn't
No,
do
but
that.
it would be because we've attuned our gut flora to be able to consume it.
You guys are positing a reality that we don't live in that has principles that are not defined.
Yes, that's
so
correct.
in that
In the world
situation,
that
I
we're
can't
making.
even.
Yeah.
No, because in the world we're making, we've made two worlds. We had a pre-utopia state and a post, and we've established that the post-utopia state is less than human. So clearly, I would not want to
You're
live
right,
in that
Daniel.
world.
It's
That's
more.
the point
It's
of
more
the fiction.
than human, and that's why it's better. That's why you're a coward who won't eat a door. That's why.
No, I have often had these arguments, especially with foodies, about this stuff, and that's why I take a hard stance. If they want to argue about it, then we've got to argue about it honestly.
Well, see, that's not what I'm interested in doing, Daniel. Come on.
Exactly.
Can we continue our tenets?
No, I'm having too much fun. Oh man. All right, fine. Daniel, I think we're back onto your second tenet anyway, which was
That the city has been sealed up, separate from civilization, and it's only recently been unsealed.
enter the womb of the Holy Mother. Check and check. We've done that. We've even come up with a reason as to why that's happened. So yeah, I think that's well satisfied. What do you think?
Nope, I think that makes
Mhm.
sense.
All right, cool. My second tenet was every bit of technology is made out of sinew, bone, and either living or unliving animal or chimera bits. So again, we've went full biopunk. I'm very happy with that. Like no problems here.
Definitely.
And Courtney, your final tenet?
Yeah. Mine was that this is at the deepest part of the Atlantic Ocean, which is the Puerto
Right.
Rico Trench, right by the Caribbean Sea. And it's almost as deep as Mount Everest is tall. And it's a very seismically active area. And also there's at least one mud volcano down there, which we
Yeah.
established had been why it's sealed up. And
Right.
with the seismic activity, we also talked about how the flesh architecture is a way to deal with that because it can expand
Yes.
and contract.
Yes. All right. We've done the recap. I'm very excited about this one. So let's go ahead and roll for the twist to see how this all works out. All right. And our twist this time is the pet cat is the true head of the whatever.
Huh.
Okay. Again, we can interpret this loosely, but boy, I think this is an appropriate thing for the thing that we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That could work.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I think that's going to do it for this episode of World Build with us. Oh boy.
I think the last time we had that twist was back in like the Land of a Thousand Tracks, the Ride the Lightning train setting.
Yeah, I think it's been a long time.
Yeah, very
Oh,
long
really?
time.
agree.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is a Kaiser prompt as well, if you'll remember.
And yeah.
Kaiser, you have a predilection for this twist. I don't know what it is. Well, with all of that said, remember that if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, click the link, follow the instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. Of course, if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at Let's World Build. If you want to come join our Discord and chat with us about BioShock spoilers or anything else in particular, you can go ahead and find that link for the episode description or on our website as well. And of course, if you're feeling particularly generous, you can always go to our Patreon, where you can give us money, get all sorts of goodies, and help have us continue to make the show. It's cool. With all that said, that's going to do it for this episode of World Build with us. And remember that we love you very much. And we're going to get through this together until next week.